Welcome to the first of two panel discussions organised and hosted by UAS International Trip Support. I'm Mike Stones for Corporate Jet Investor, and it's my pleasure and privilege to present this session dedicated to mergers and acquisitions in business aviation, opportunities in business and next-gen aviation. So, M&A, there's a lot of it about. We produce a newsletter from this show, and yesterday's was due to be about the latest initiative, Climbing Fast. We had to ditch that at the last moment because, of course, we heard the breaking news that Gamma Aviation had sold Jet East to Westar Aviation for £131 million. In fact, M&A seems to be a thickening thread in our coverage and in the industry. And I'm looking forward to exploring that here today. It features in our latest journal, Corporate Jet Investor Quarterly, where we unpack the tangled history of Wings Up through its various journeys to Wall Street and perhaps beyond. So, let's start off. To tackle a range of questions, we've assembled an expert panel who are both expert at analysing and closing M&A deals. They are, starting from this side, we have Rishi Majithia, who is head of investment for MONTE, specialising in financing zero and low emission technologies. MONTE supports industry transition to net zero by offering leasing solutions for sustainable aviation. Richard Coe, of course, who's sitting next to me on this side, who with partner Christoph Kohler founded WINGX, aircraft tracking and analysing company, which they recently sold to JetNet. And as an exclusive, Richard has promised to reveal the precise financial terms of the deal here in this session. That's right, Richard, isn't it?
Yeah, luckily I brought along Josh Baird. Josh, I hope you heard that promise.
Great. So on this side, we have lucky to have David Vanderzwaag, who is CEO of Airhawke, and Bertelex Aero Design Completion Specialists, and David sealed the acquisition of Bertelex earlier this summer. So some personal testimony on both sides of me from Richard and David on that. And finally, we have Nick Copley on this side, who is founder and president of Sherpa report.com. This online publication provides insights on charter, jets, jet cards, memberships, and much, much more. And we'll be hearing from Nick about that later. So I want to begin by inviting each of our panelists to share their opening thoughts about M&A. And then we'll move on to some specific questions designed to probe the state of M&A today, where it's going, and what to look out for. Let's begin, of course, with Rishi. Rishi, can you give us opening thoughts?
Thank you. From our perspective at MONTE, we're seeing a lot of M&A coming through the lens of either distressed investments, so coming out of Chapter 11, or indeed businesses trying to accelerate their sustainable strategies, so acquiring businesses that are further ahead in those strategies or indeed in advanced air mobility. I'm sure we'll go into that in a bit. And I think we're likely to see those trends continue in M&A in the coming years as well.
Yeah. What I'd like to do, if we can, is separate conventional, in inverted commas, aviation from next gen, because, of course, the M&A factors driving both of those sectors are somewhat different. Richard.
Well, I've been in the industry for 20 years, and it's an industry which is still fairly young and still very fragmented. So I think my first thought would be that M&A is a very good thing for this industry. It needs consolidation, it needs economies of scale, and I think it's welcome to see an uptick in the number of M&A events.
Great, and presumably you'd apply that tenfold to next-gen aviation.
I think that could add enormously to our industry, yeah.
Yeah, okay. David, what's your initial quick take on M&A in business aviation?
Yeah, I think from my perspective, the reality is...
We'll try that.
Yeah, let's do that. Thanks, Mike. The reality is that, as an aerospace and defense industry, we're going to have to get creative in terms of technology, and the technology is going to drive that next gen. And I just question whether, given the regulatory framework that we operate under, and the fact that we don't generally like to take big risks, do we have the wherewithal, like, you know, tech companies in Silicon Valley, to be able to identify young, promising startups that can change the game for the aerospace industry?
Do you see a much bigger acceleration for next-gen aircraft than conventional business aviation?
Absolutely, I do. I think that the next gen is going to drive business aviation because the people that are flying business jets are going to want that technology behind them.
Okay, thank you. Nick?
At Sherpa Report, we're mainly focused on operators because people come to us to understand the different operators. So I can really comment on the operators where there's been quite a bit of consolidation, obviously, over the last few years. And I would see that continuing because, as Richard said, we're in a very fragmented industry. If you look at the number of Part 135 operators, there are thousands of them. So from a consumer perspective, it's very confusing out there as to, okay, which operator do I go and work with?
Yeah.
Never mind which product do I use. So yeah, I see ongoing consolidation in the industry for sure.
Well, I look forward to exploring that. And of course, OEMs have not been slow to, some would say, hoover up supply chain companies in order to secure their supply chains in these difficult and challenging times. Let's move on to questions. Perhaps a hideously naive one from me, no surprise to some, including my editor-in-chief, Alistair White, over there. Is M&A a good thing? Or is it a bad thing? Is it the sign of a healthy industry or an ailing industry? Rishi?
I think coming back to a theme we've discussed already, it's a fragmented market, and you know, it depends on the type of transaction, but typically it's a sign of a healthy industry, one in which businesses are seeing a lot of opportunities. Clearly, as I mentioned, there are transactions coming out of distress which can cause some concern, and with the interest rate environment as it is, that might be a trend that continues. But typically, I think, you know, certainly at Monte, we think it's a positive and something that's exciting for our industry.
Could you give guidance on what proportion of M&A deals you think, in general terms, are distressed?
That would be guesswork, candidly. I don't know if the other panelists have a view on that.
Yeah, okay. Richard, I'm very sure you know nothing about distress M&A. What do you think? Can you give us a bit more of a clue about whether you think it's a good thing or a bad thing?
I read an article by McKinsey that said that 10% of large M&A deals have failed in the last 5 years.
Right.
So that gives you an idea of the kind of, at least from their point of view, the proportion of deals that don't work. But I mean, generally speaking, you would think that shareholders and lenders wouldn't allow M&A to go ahead unless it made sense. So, you know, you're either buying into a sort of underpriced market and getting the rewards upstream, or the market's going gangbusters as it did in our sector in 21 and 22, and you're buying into that rising tide.
Yeah. So to a certain extent, that was a product of the market conditions at the time.
Very easy money.
Yeah, very easy money. Yeah, of course. David, do you think M&A is a good thing, or does it worry you sometimes?
No, in general, I think it's great. I think it's a sign of a healthy industry, but it's also can be a sign of a changing industry. I mean, one of the things that we're definitely seeing is, you know, with the geopolitical landscape, there's a lot of sanctions involved in doing business across the world globally, in which we're obviously a global industry, and I think we're going to see a lot more kind of insourcing and M&A, you know, within allied countries to ensure that the supply chains are secured within our industry.
How long did it take to arrange your latest deal? Can you tell us? Can you give us any guidance?
Yeah, it was 8 months. No, sorry, 10 months.
10 months. Richard?
Yeah, about 10 to 12 months.
So pretty standard.
Yeah, I would say so.
Okay. And any lessons that you learned? Would you do it differently next time?
Yeah, it was a great fit. I mean, I'm not just saying that because I'm sure Silversmith are amongst the audience, but it is generally a good fit. I mean, and you know, we've been through our growth period of 10 years, and we've had discussions with other partners over that time, and there was no doubt in my mind that it just made sense, and it was a relatively straightforward M&A, I would say.
Yeah. Was it a smooth path for you, David, and would you do anything differently, having accomplished that journey now?
I wouldn't say it was a smooth path. I think, I had said to someone close to me a few times, if it was easy, you know, everyone would do it.
Yeah.
But that being said, you know, we got there, and I would say the path became quite smooth post-acquisition, because there was just an incredibly good fit, like Richard said, using that word, and so, you know, and then I also was armed with having gone through acquisitions myself on the other side as an employee in some of the historical employment that I've had. And so I think I was just well equipped to be able to manage that transition with the, you know, with the business and the employees and customers that are involved.
Okay, I'd like to explore that granular aspect of of managing an M&A for owners and indeed former owners, together with employees, and why should they be last? They should be first, of course, customers. But before we do that, let's move to Nick and say, is 10 months a pretty standard figure, do you think, for M&A activity?
It really depends on the sort of size and scale of the deal.
Yeah.
Exactly, yeah. So just depending how tight a fit it is, whether it's a natural fit, whether it's a complementary fit. If it's totally complementary and you're not integrating too many things in the background, it can be fairly straightforward. But if there's a lot of background integration of people and systems and procedures, that can take a long time to put all that together and do it properly.
Yeah. Generally, is it a relatively smooth path, or can it be a really rocky road?
Yes.
Yes to question part A or yes to part B?
Both of them.
Okay.
It really depends on the teams on either side, ultimately, and how the motivations and the knowledge and experience of both of those teams, and how willing and able they are to get it done, and how good they are at planning that combination and foresight and bringing the people over, bringing the people on board. There's so many steps depending on the nature of what that deal is and what the two companies are that have been combined.
Okay, all right. So now I want to consider what are the most significant M&As in business aviation. I'm not thinking by value. I'm thinking about significance in terms of strategic direction for the industry. And I want to start with Rishi's view on that, please.
So I guess, you know, looking at our sustainability lens at Monte, a couple of deals have kind of caught our attention because it shows traditional businesses trying to accelerate their sustainability strategies through M&A. So for example, Surf Air recently acquired, or through their IPO acquired Southern Airways Express. Surf Air have a stated goal of retrofitting aircraft into hydrogen or hybrid power or electric power, starting with the Cessna Grand Caravan. And Southern have a fleet of 40 of those aircraft. So that provides them with that feedstock to sort of accelerate that strategy. Similarly, Norwegian recently announced the acquisition of Widerøe, and Widerøe are the largest regional carrier in Norway, and Norway has a stated goal of having all regional flights being flown with zero-emission aircraft by 2040. Widerøe are very active in the sustainability space, and they have a division called Widerøe Zero, who have already signed partnerships with OEMs that are OEMs for next-gen aircraft. So I think both of those deals show that people are now buying businesses to accelerate that strategy, and we think that's going to happen in business aviation.
What do you think? What do you think is driving that activity? What's at the heart of it? Is it a genuine ESG desire to do the right thing? Is it pressure from customers, or is it long-term commercial advantage? What do you think the primary motives are?
I think it's 1 and 3. So some pressures internally, and it's a quick and arguably cheaper way to access some of these resources for next-gen aircraft, buying them in rather than having to develop them themselves. But also it's a defensible strategy. You know, buying businesses where these could theoretically be competitors in the future, it's important to get those in early and buy them cheaper.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Richard, most significant M&A apart, of course, from WINGX?
Yeah, I mean, there's been since 2019 some really big acquisitions. I mean, the Signature chain obviously got purchased, and the Atlantic chain got purchased. Those are both value terms, by far the largest multi-billion deals. But I think, you know, what we're seeing in our industry, I think I'm not an M&A expert, but if you look at, like, you've got vertical integration, you've got horizontal integration, right? So you've got the operators, number of operators, and obviously Nick, you know well about this, sort of 10 of the top 20 operators have come under, largely speaking, VistaJet wheels up. So that's a lot of a lot of horizontal integration going on there. And then you've had the vertical integration where you've had operators look for the associated advantage of controlling maintenance, for example.
Yep.
You've seen obviously FlexJet with flying colours.
Yeah.
And you've seen the OEMs also want to control the aftermarket,
The supply chain and the
supply
aftermarket.
chain,
Yes.
and acquire those resources. So I think those are significant. I think that they will, they should be providing increasing economies of scale. Are they ultimately helping the customer as well? I think that's a question mark.
Yeah.
You'd have to go and ask all the FBO customers.
Yes. Yeah. David, what's your take on this?
Yeah, when I asked the question, I think one of the most significant acquisitions, and it's not recent, but it's really two, and they're related. First you had Rockwell Collins purchase BE Aerospace a number of years back, and what was interesting about that is within, I think it was about a year, UTC came in and snapped up both of them. Because they just looked so good on paper, and then you had that UTC merger with Raytheon, and now you've got a situation where that tier one has effectively more leverage and control than the OEMs in a lot of cases, and I think that's significant because it's actually forced the OEMs, and we're not talking about small OEMs, we're talking about large OEMs like Boeing, to go, wow, we actually need to kind of insource some of these key capabilities like avionics, which are core to every aircraft today, in order to stay viable and not be beholden to these companies that are on the same scale as them and own those technologies.
So the example you mentioned set a trend that you will continue to see unfold, do you think?
Absolutely. Yeah,
Okay.
I believe that.
Nick, what would you pick out as being something that sets the trend and points the way for the future?
Well, I think a couple of interesting deals from the sort of on the operator side that have been done in the last couple of years was the two deals that FlexJet did buying helicopter companies. They bought AAG in New York and they bought Halo in the UK. So that's FlexJet getting into vertical lift, which they weren't in before. So it's complementary to their fractional business. If you're flying a big Gulfstream across the Atlantic, FlexJet now have the in-house capacity to give you vertical lifts to downtown New York or downtown London. So that's a very complementary deal, which is smart. But what it also does, it gives FlexJet that experience and knowledge in vertical lift. And all the eVTOL action that we know is coming, they're gaining that experience early to have knowledge for when it really comes down and when eVTOLs are really here. So those are interesting deals.
Absolutely. So it's not simply wanting to provide a seamless service for customers in your example.
Right.
It's also anticipating the future. Is that right?
Exactly. Yeah, it's doing both of those things in those two deals, which is a really smart way, looking at it externally of what they've done in those deals.
Yeah. Okay. So let's move on now to happy marriages. David, how do you make sure that an M&A is made in heaven rather than the other place? What are the hallmarks of a successful, vibrant M&A deal?
Yeah, that's a great question, Mike. I think, and it's key. It's absolutely critical. I mean, if you're spending that money, you don't want to lose any of the value that you've just purchased, right? So, what I would recommend to everyone, just as a starting tactic, is that first closing date. There needs to be something spectacular for every employee that you've just effectively purchased. Something that makes them go, okay, first day with the new company. This is exciting, right? And so for us, that was as simple as a gift bag on every single desk with, a bunch of goodies in it. We throw a party, we talk about the vision and how everyone's gonna grow from it. Because the reality is every M&A is gonna result in change for the company that's been acquired. And so that's just a cold, hard reality. And the other reality is generally people don't like change.
Yeah.
So that means, they're guaranteed to get something they probably aren't gonna like. So you've got to make sure that with all those changes, you outweigh anything they could view as a negative by something better that's a positive, and just keep them focused on the positives of the changes.
And how much did you increase your workforce?
So we've increased our workforce twofold within the first year and a half of the acquisition. So 100% increase.
Wow.
and we've retained every employee but one from the time we acquired the business a year and a half ago.
Okay, that's great. That's great. So let's turn to the other side of that coin with Richard now, who is of course a former owner. Richard, are you a happy camper?
Yeah, I'm just looking for my goodie bag.
We all get those at the end, by the way. Yeah.
David, do you have any spares?
Rolex watches for everyone from Alison.
Look, I mean, again, I'm amongst M&A experts. I'm not one of them, but I think when you do the deal, it's relatively straightforward to tick the boxes around some parts of the deal. You know, the market fit, the product fit, the customer fit. But when it comes to the human factor, that's really tough, and that's fungible. And if you're gonna take on a company and find that your key people are leaving, you're very unlikely to complete the mission. So I think that's where it's most critical and most difficult to measure.
So what thought processes did you and Christoph go through thinking about how you would communicate this?
I think you've got to have a buyer that's going to be engaged in the business, whilst also giving you the impression that they're giving you the autonomy to keep on being entrepreneurial.
Yeah.
So that's a tough balance, but that's got to be struck, because entrepreneurs don't stop being entrepreneurs because they join a big company, and you got to let that talent flourish.
Yeah.
But at the same time, a company that you purchase, you suddenly wanted to grow 3 times as big. Well, you're going to put in, you've got to put in investment and support.
Yeah.
Because otherwise everyone ends up disappointed.
Yeah. I think what's really valuable at your contribution is the personal journey you've just made and sharing insights from that. So thank you very much for doing that. Rishi, thoughts on what makes a good M&A deal?
I think the gentleman next to me are much better placed to answer that question, but I think one perspective I want to share is, I guess in both of these cases we're talking about strategic sales, so or acquisitions to other businesses in the industry, and there are also instances in which you have institutional capital coming into transactions, private equity, credit funds, etc. And in those cases, some of these metrics we've been discussing change or can change quite significantly. Time of the transaction can be a lot shorter if sales processes are being run. But some things that don't change are strategic fit, and you need to make sure that you've got the right buyer there, because invariably if you're selling a business, you're probably going to have to still roll some of your equity into that transaction and maybe stay on the management team, because those investors will want some alignment with the vendor. So I think that becomes increasingly relevant in those deals.
Okay, thank you for that. So setting aside next gen, which is another case, do you feel we've approached peak merger, or is that another naive question from me? Will M&A always be with us because that's what businesses do? They evolve and they grow.
I mean, next gen's where we specialize, but I think in any industry, M&A is cyclical. There's always consolidation, and then a couple of businesses become too big. They have non-core business at arms, and then they want to divest them. So I think this will be a cyclical thing throughout the aviation industry.
Well, I look forward to hearing your different answers on next gen in a moment. Meanwhile, we'll go to Richard. Is M&A a cycle, and if so, where are we in that cycle? Interest rates rising, are those factors driving more M&A, or is it opportunity?
Yeah, higher financing costs, a post-COVID surge, which is kind of tapering, deflating. More regulatory attention. These all make deals more difficult. That said, as I said at the beginning, this is an immature industry that's still very fragmented, despite the number of operator consolidation deals that have happened still leaves a very fragmented operator space. I think a question mark would be, is this industry kind of idiosyncratic to the point of having a fairly low ceiling on consolidation? Does it have like high touch characteristics? I mean, you simply can't roll up certain service parts.
Yeah. In your mind, where does the dividing line fall between mergers inspired by mutual opportunity and those in the current market that perhaps partly reflect higher interest rates, the COVID legacy, supply chain, the damn difficulties of running an aviation business?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there are a lot of businesses probably in this war that are suffering and might simply not have the economies of scale as the environment gets more difficult.
Yeah.
And either, they're going to step out of the business, or they're going to be, essentially brought into a bigger group.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, David. Where are we in the cycle? Do you think, if you think there is a cycle?
Yeah, I would hazard that we're probably more toward the peak of the cycle. We've come through COVID. We're probably not going to see a lot more deals on the table going forward. We do have higher financing costs, but then at the same time, there is some things that are still driving M&A, such as the geopolitical insecurity and how that drives new opportunities for certain businesses that they want to capitalize on, as well as securing that supply chain. And then finally, the sustainability aspect, where all these businesses are looking at what's going to keep them going, 10, 20 years down the road, that they need to invest in today.
Nick, peak M&A, or like death and taxes, always with us?
We've certainly just been through a peak during COVID, and that was, on the operator side, that was purely driven by the COVID-induced demand.
Yeah.
There just weren't enough planes and enough pilots to satisfy that demand, very simply. So there were a lot of deals being done in 2020, 2021, of operators being bought just to secure those pilots and just to secure those planes. So that was a real peak, purely driven by COVID. And we're certainly on the other side of that now, for sure.
Yeah.
And we can touch on, we've sort of hinted around the two big players who are driving a lot of those bigger deals in that space as well.
Yeah. So perhaps the availability of pilots and A&P technicians isn't the pressing problem it was. Do you think that's true?
It's still a problem out there, for sure.
Yeah.
If you talk to anybody around here, getting good qualified pilots is a problem. Getting good qualified trained maintenance technicians is still a problem. And people are looking at all sorts of different solutions to solve those problems.
Yeah. Along with companies like Disney Corporation that come in and recruit whole classes from Embry-Riddle.
Right.
Well, and if I can add to what Nick said, I mean, as an example, WestJet and Swoop are looking at a merger right now to address that exact issue, so they don't have any concerns being able to take a Swoop pilot, put them on a WestJet flight, or vice versa.
Okay. So, anything to add there? Anyone? No?
I mean, I'm not here to big up JetNet entirely, but I would say that the IQ summit, which happened recently, one of the questions that they asked in their market-wide survey is, where would you invest 500 million? Which part of the industry would you invest 500 million? And by far and large, the focus was on training.
Yeah.
And that I think is a big opportunity area, and I'd be surprised if we don't see deals there.
Okay. Rishi, what would you do with 500 million professionally rather than privately? You could tell us both if you like.
Okay, so I mean, all the exciting answers about privately were going through my mind. But yeah, professionally, I mean, at Monte, what we're looking to do right now is grow our fleet. So we're a lessor of aircraft around the world, and we're focusing on working with operators that want to work with us to decarbonize their aircraft when the next generation of aircraft are commercially certified. So we're working on building our fleet of aircraft with those operators right now, and we have a number of deals that we want to execute this year and next year, and I think we would use that capital to invest in those transactions.
So am I right in thinking that the complex area of M&A for new generation aircraft is a different case? We can't take the two together, can we?
I mean, M&A in next-gen aircraft is slightly different. Will have slightly different themes to what we've been discussing just now.
Do you want to just guide us to those? Because you're in a well-placed to do that.
Yeah, sure. I mean, we have a lot of OEMs that are looking to certification and trying to reach that point, both with eVTOLs and more traditional aircraft types. And given the lack of availability of capital, people are going to struggle to get there, and I don't think everybody will reach commercial certification. And that will drive M&A. There'll be certain bits of IP in different businesses that will be interesting, and that will definitely drive M&A. And then another factor is, I guess, akin to what I was talking about earlier, more traditional OEMs looking to get sustainable, capabilities in-house will also drive M&A. So, for example, Airbus recently invested in ZeroAvia, a hydrogen propulsion technology provider. Not M&A, but I think that is the start of businesses looking to find those capabilities. So more traditional businesses looking for those capabilities.
So I think there are somewhere around 400 players at the moment. I mean, it's going to be a bloodbath, isn't it? I mean, or is that my journalistic hyperbole? But surely very few of those are going to make it to market.
I don't know about very few, but equally bloodbath is probably, it makes it seem, I guess, more challenging. If businesses are merging and you're taking capabilities from others, you can argue that the merged business is going to be a stronger entity, has a bigger balance sheet, and provides the better solutions for our industry going forward. So it's not necessarily a bad thing, and I guess we can't forecast how many of them will sort of make it to market.
Yeah.
Mike, a question on the whole eVTOL evolution is looking at the forecasts of some of the number of the planes that will be out there.
Yeah.
Is the training for all those new pilots. I mean, there are thousands and thousands of aircraft in some of these forecasts, and
Which
we're all
they need new pilots, though.
well, initially they will.
Yeah.
Maybe
Well,
sometime down the road they won't. But,
Wisc say they're going to a pilotless model immediately, don't they?
well, but what does immediately mean in terms of when that airplane is certified to fly?
Yeah, yeah.
So in the meantime, they will need pilots for sure. And so where do those pilots come from as part of that question?
Do you think for M&A in the next gen sector, it's going to be brutal, or is that just my depressing outlook in terms of M&A for next gen?
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head, pointing out that there are hundreds of, I'm not sure companies is the right word, but projects out there with different people developing different aircraft. So clearly they won't all make it to market. So there will be consolidation in the sector for sure, without a doubt.
Yeah.
And it will be interesting. Obviously, there's several of them out there at the moment that have gone public and are listed and, are very visible. But there's hundreds more that aren't public that are still under wraps, so it will be interesting to see how all that pans out for sure.
Thank you for that. David, what's your perspective on this?
Well, given the engineering background I have and a good discussion I had with someone very intelligent and very involved in that industry recently, his comment was, when you're looking at any one of these many startups that are out there, you've got to look at the potential solution, and then you've got to bounce it off of basic physics and really assess, how much of a leap are they trying to make in terms of the basic physics here, how that aircraft uses energy, and then the flight characteristics primarily, in the eVTOL side especially. So I think there's the bigger of a leap that each player is trying to take, the less likelihood they're going to be able to land the jump.
Okay, thank you for that. Specific question to Rishi now, because I know that your COO, Timothy Eyre, has said that your company is technology agnostic. What does that mean, and what drew the company to the sector?
Sure. So I guess as a management team, we've been working in leasing and financing of regional aircraft for 15 to 20 years. And our definition of regional aircraft is sort of sub-30-seat aircraft, so small regional aircraft. And we saw that our aircraft were going to be the first to be decarbonized through retrofitting solutions or replacement with clean sheet technology. And we wanted to help accelerate that trend by setting up Monte to focus exclusively on financing or leasing those types of aircraft that are either new clean sheet design aircraft or aircraft that will be retrofitted into zero or low emission propulsion technologies. Yeah. What we mean by being technology agnostic is that we don't think one solution will fit for every type of operator. We don't think hydrogen power will work for everyone, hybrid power will work for everyone. That's because of the fact that each operator will have different use cases and need different performance from their aircraft. So as a lessor, and I guess more than that, we are trying to provide operators with a suite of solutions and work with them to figure out which is the right solution for them and work with them to decarbonize their aircraft. And to do so, we're sort of providing them with a full suite of solutions. So not only the financing, but we have close partnerships with our OEMs. So we'll work with the operator to figure out, as I said, the right solution for them, but also then finance the infrastructure associated with those solutions.
Okay,
as well.
In the closing minute or so, where should we look for M&A activity in the future? What particular sectors do we think would be a good fit for that, leaving aside next gen? Richard, briefly, please.
I think it'd be interesting to look at what happens in the most fragmented part of our industry, which is brokerage. Because I'm not sure how that would be rolled up or perhaps disintermediated, but I think, at the moment it carries an enormous amount of value, but also adds quite a lot to the cost of business, and I'd be interested to see what happens there.
Thank you for being brief. David, would it be the completion space or elsewhere that we should look for more M&As?
You know what? I'd actually be looking in that kind of like tier 2, 3, or 4 space where the technology is being driven for next gen aircraft.
Yeah. Okay. Briefly, Nick, please.
Certainly, operators are going to continue consolidating, without a doubt. There's just too many of them, and it causes confusion in the marketplace for sure. And equally to touch on Richard's point, brokers, are a layer above that layer. So there are a lot of brokers and very little limitations on someone becoming a broker, which adds to the confusion. So those, building a brand basically is a key part of the equation.
Quick yes/no answer to this from everyone. Through the magic of Corporate Jet Investor, we're going to transport you to the Paris Olympics. Would you get in that new eVTOL service? Yay or nay?
Yes.
No.
Depends where it took me.
Yes.
Took you to a desirable destination.
The netball finals.
Yeah.
Fun.
Yes.
Well, mixed response there. That's our last question. Thank you so much to our panel for working through those topics. It just remains for me to say thank you to Rishi from MONTE, for Richard Coe from WINGX and JetNet, David from Airhawke, thank you very much, senior moment there, and Nick, of course, from SherpaReport.com. I've been Mike Stones for Corporate Jet Investor. Thank you very much, and goodbye.